Have you ever felt frustrated because of your lack of progress on the spiritual journey? Maybe you think things aren't going quite fast enough to suit you. This is the essence of impatience, which is a yearning or expectation for rapid spiritual growth or even the end stages of enlightenment. Impatience can be like a tempest brewing within us, stirred by the ego's insatiable thirst for control and predictability. It's yet another desire that the ego attaches and clings to. The ego is like a puppet master. It thrives on the illusion of certainty, meticulously crafting a worldview that aligns with its own expectations and which perpetuates itself. But when the universe dances at a different pace, impatience can take center stage and become a major disturbance on a spiritual journey. While many of us may yearn for a shortcut to transcendental knowledge, I have to break it to you. There are very few shortcuts on a quest for spiritual discovery. The path is often winding and the journey may be long, and we should expect to encounter significant challenges along the way. One of those challenges is often impatience, born from the ego's demands for a rapid pace of progress. But the divine has its own rhythm, its own pace. When the universe's timeline set before us doesn't meet our ego driven expectations, it can trigger an upwelling of frustration, a sense of dissatisfaction that can potentially topple our resolve. Worse yet, because of impatience or restlessness, frustration or a lack of motivation, we may even abandon the spiritual journey altogether, which would suit the ego just fine. After all, if you've watched my previous videos, then you know that the ego often views spiritual pursuits as a threat to its own survival. And you also know that the ego has a lot of tricks up its sleeve. It can become attached to rapid spiritual progress or even demand the pinnacle of enlightenment by a certain date or time, but such demands are bound to end in disappointment. And if we start comparing our progress with others, this is yet the ego rearing its head again, seeking external validation. You'll remember the ego thrives on comparison, whispering in our ear, "Oh, you need to catch up," or "You should be ahead of them." The ego's incessant need for external validation can create a habit of comparing our journey with that of others. But such comparisons only fuel our impatience, further entangling us in the web of dissatisfaction and frustration. And if left unchecked to run rampant, impatience can morph into a destructive force, like a wildfire consuming our peace and serenity and blocking our path. But remember, impatience isn't necessarily an enemy. Every obstacle we encounter on the journey also represents an opportunity. For example, we can use impatience as a mirror to reveal the ego's influence on our spiritual journey. By casting a light of awareness and understanding the ego's ways, we can learn to navigate the path of self discovery with greater ease and compassion. Now, let's talk about another strategy the ego can use to derail our spiritual journey. Have you ever experienced a sense of agitation that keeps you from being fully present in the moment? This is often restlessness. It can manifest as anxiety, boredom, or a craving for external stimulation. It's like an itch that's always there, compelling you to do something, anything, just to keep from sitting still and revealing yourself. You see, the ego is a master of disguise, and it doesn't want us to face any of the uncomfortable truths that lie within us. So it can keep us busy with distractions. It might be an urge to check social media every 5 minutes, or perhaps a compulsion to keep the TV on even when you're not watching it. It could be an incessant need to be productive, to constantly achieve, or to relentlessly pursue novelty. Americans, after all, are the most time stressed people on the planet, always in a hurry, harried and hurried. These are all ruses, smoke and mirrors that the ego uses to avoid facing difficult emotions or uncomfortable inner experiences, or to avoid the spiritual path altogether. Or the ego might fear inner emptiness, so it might seek distractions, engage in mental chatter, and relish overstimulation to escape fully facing itself. But here's the thing, restlessness is actually another opportunity for us to make progress on the spiritual path, but only if we recognize it for what it is, acknowledge it, and take the necessary steps to remedy it. It's like a signal urging us to slow down and pay attention. It's an invitation to pause, center ourselves in the present moment, and reconnect with the eternal now. Imagine being in a beautiful garden, but you're so restless that you're thinking about what's for dinner or replaying a conversation you had earlier in the day. You're physically there, but you're not truly present. You're missing the beauty around you, the fragrance of the flowers, the gentle rustle of the leaves, the soft song of the birds. That's what restlessness does. It robs us of the richness of the present moment. Like impatience, restlessness is yet another tool the ego can use to protect its self-identity. It's a defense mechanism, a way for the ego to maintain control, to resist change, and to avoid facing the unknown. To preserve itself, the ego maintains a disconnect from our true selves, but by recognizing the ego's strategies, by understanding that restlessness is a signal for us to pay attention and act, we can begin to reconnect with ourselves, with the present moment, and ultimately with the peace and contentment that lies within us. The ego can latch onto and identify with almost anything, like spiritual outcomes or even the spiritual path itself. However, it also resists anything that threatens to change or disrupt its carefully constructed identity and its images of itself. It's like the ego builds walls into a fortress and then uses impatience and restlessness as loyal sentinels to keep true progress at bay. Of course, the ego has innumerable tools at its disposal, such as all forms of escapism, distractions, external stimulation, wants, desires, rat races, and so forth, which you can learn more about by watching my previous videos. The point is that when patience and restlessness arise, we must be aware and recognize them as egoic strategies to maintain control and predictability, often by thwarting a spiritual path. We must recognize when the ego may be trying to avoid facing uncomfortable truths or the fear of inner emptiness. When we understand the ego's strategies, we can navigate impatience and restlessness with greater ease and self-compassion. We can remind ourselves that the spiritual path is not about eliminating the ego, but rather it's about transcending the ego. Instead of battling the ego or getting into a tug of war with our minds, we should learn to welcome obstacles and challenges onto the path and recognize that impatience and restlessness are actually invitations for us to relax, pay attention, let go, and be mindful. Only then will it be possible for us to apply the proper antidotes, which is what our next video is all about. So be sure to subscribe because you don't want to miss out on the practical and powerful tips for overcoming impatience and restlessness on your journey. Well, that's all for today. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to tell your friends about us. And until next time, please remain calm, happy, and aware.